And I feel that everyone is psychic. It has to be. We all have a soul. So there is that part of us that links to soul that has that higher knowing. And we don't understand it in the context of traditional science at the moment, although I do know that there is a lot of science now that is starting to look at consciousness. What is it? Where does it go? Is it part of us? Is it in the brain? Where is it? And I feel science is only as good as the instruments that you have to measure it. If we don't have the right instruments yet, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I'm hoping that with time, people will give this field a little bit more of an investigative and scientific basis so that we can start to see that the science will catch up with what we've been observing for hundreds of years.
Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Beitz. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. My guest today, Ioanna Serpanos, trained in the male-dominated world of engineering, where only 4% of engineers were female. A journey that began with a foundation rooted in logic and structure. However, her thirst for understanding into the metaphysical realm and the mysteries of existence led her to explore the deeper layers of consciousness, where she discovered the profound connection between quantum physics, science, and spirituality. This fusion of disciplines forms the bedrock of her approach, infusing her teachings with both depth and practicality. Armed with a robust business and corporate background, Ioanna offers more than just insights into the mechanics of mediumship. She provides valuable guidance on how to navigate the landscape of running a successful psychic medium practice. Ioanna, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Doug, for having me. And it's an absolute delight to be here.
Yeah. So just take us back to that time, I guess initially that interim, like how did you go from engineering to psychic abilities and turning that into a business?
Yeah, it's interesting because people in my current profession generally have different paths. They certainly don't come from a science or an engineering background. So I'm a little bit unique in that regard, or it seems so on the surface. But as you dig deeper into it, you actually find it's probably not as unique as it at first appears. But for me, growing up, there's two phases to the transition. When I was very young, so a very 3-year-old, 4-year-old, I have very vivid memory of seeing spirit people in my bedroom walking around at night. And that used to always give me just a real sense of fear initially. So I used to sit there and think, gosh, who are these people? Why are they here? Are they going to do anything to me? So as a child, you can imagine that was the fearful thing of who are these strangers? As I grew to about 6 or 7, I used to see them and get a little bit curious. So I do have that memory of the ability being present from a young age. As I progressed through my schooling, science became my thing. And my first sort of initiation, if you like, or excitement around science was, I think it was about year 7 high school, when we grew copper sulfate crystals in chemistry. And I thought that was fascinating. From a liquid, we grew these beautiful crystals that we had on the windowsill. And it was that's what captured my imagination and really piqued my interest for science. And as I continued down the path of education, I got to the stage where originally I was going to do a science degree. And at that time, the Australian government was really promoting women in engineering. So it was sort of late 80s, very early 90s, and they wanted to increase female representation in engineering. So I didn't really know what an engineer was, but what attracted me to it was that if you didn't like it, the first year of engineering was counted as science and you could continue on with your degree. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I decided I would go. And from the minute I entered into the engineering field, for me, it was very fascinating and exciting to know that I could design something that would have a real practical use in society. And I guess that was my journey into why I became an engineer. I found that I loved it. And the very first year of engineering in Australia, where I studied, which was the University of Tasmania, they had a common discipline across the first year. So you got to do civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electronics engineering, computer, so the whole gambit. And part of that common curriculum was physics, and also, of course, the maths that came with it as well, calculus and linear algebra. And so the physics for me also captured my excitement and attention, talking about quantum physics, talking about light, talking about frequency. And of course, frequency continued through because I chose electronics engineering. And this whole concept just really excited me. And off I went through that discipline, graduated. And then my second job as an engineer was in the automotive industry, which I stayed in that industry for about 15 to 18 years, and loved it. And I loved working on vehicles and vehicle technologies that were at the forefront of their technology envelope, and that was really exciting to me. So I didn't really go into the psychic side. I kind of forgot about it and I left it back there. However, what had followed me through was my sensitivity. So I was very sensitive and very aware of emotions, the vibe of the room. Often I would come up with what the real agendas were in the meeting rooms without sort of knowing it. So I seemed to be speaking the language of whoever was putting their needs across in a meeting room. And it wasn't until, and I got very successful in my career, but it wasn't until I was quite progressed, very early 30s, when I just thought there's got to be more to life than this. So on the surface, I had it all happening. I had a wonderful career. I traveled for work. I had incredible opportunities. I had wealth, beautiful home and the cars and all those sort of material things that we're told that we need to strive for. And I wasn't happy. I was felt very empty and I felt very unfulfilled. And it wasn't until I went searching that I remembered that aspect of me that I'd forgotten, which was that part of me that was very much aware of spirit.
So, all right. So, yeah, that was the child. And so I just jotted down a note there, like
Yeah.
the visions as the child, like you had them at 3 and 4, they scared you a bit. At 6 or
Mm.
7, they intrigued you. Did they stop after 7? Like, did you stop seeing these people?
I did. I stopped seeing them objectively. So that's what we call objective clairvoyance. I stopped seeing them that way. But if I reflect back, I probably would say that I've always had an awareness of them. I just didn't know what it was, because I always had this sense of never being quite alone. But when the child goes past 7 years old, 7 or 8 typically, they tend to forget all those beautiful parts of ourselves that are quite natural. The school system changes it for us. We start to become more practical focused. We use the left brain more. We start to become, we use logic and reasoning and all those wonderful things. And our creativity gets stifled, particularly as we move through the high school years, the middle years, and then the university, unless, of course, you are a creative that has gone down that creative path and that is your sole focus. But generally, society says, don't do those. Become lawyers, become doctors, become engineers, become accountants. They're not really telling us to be musicians, to be dancers, to be sculptors, to be painters.
Yeah, yeah. And when you said before you started to get the trappings of, you had the nice car, the house, you were traveling, all that sort of stuff, the programming, and I think it maybe that programming starts to take over even at a young age, like this is what you're now aiming for. And that programming, when we start to achieve it, it starts to mask or reduce our ability to tap into that frequency of these other realms. We're now just focused on the car payment, the house payment, our frequency starts to align there a little bit. Does that sound
It does, yes, Doug, because as you know, what we focus on is what comes into our awareness field. It's what creates our reality. And we are geared up as a society that values money. If you took 10 people and put them in a room and said, what is success? 9 out of 10 would say, oh, having the house, having the car, all the material things. It's a very rare person that says success for me is being able to have the freedom to be and to explore all aspects of who I am. And we don't give people permission to do that. You know, when there's creativity, and I think parents do, you know, they think they're doing the right thing. You know, if your child's saying, I want to be particularly men, if a man said, I wanted to be a ballet dancer, for example, the majority of unless they have a very, very supportive, open family, they would say, oh, you can't make a living being a dancer or a musician. You know, you need to go and get a good education, and that's what's going to make it for you. And it just cuts off that aspect. And I think that's a very sad thing for people in general, and particularly for men, to not be able to have access to that side of them. Because in my world, in the business world and the corporate world, I noticed that there was a lot of intuition at play, particularly with very successful executives. And then they wouldn't necessarily call themselves psychic, right? But they would say things like, my feeling's not right about this, or, you know, my gut tells me I need to do something else. Or I feel the issue is here in this section of the design. And that's all intuition. Yet, if you called them out on it and said, that is your intuition right there, they would feel a bit uncomfortable about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, particularly the men. If you raised that word, and I've got, I mean, people ask me what my podcast's about, and it's all about helping men to develop their intuition. And I've had people suggest that, other men, maybe can you reword that a bit so that we take that word out? And I'm like, no, I'm ahead of my time. I'm just waiting until the world catches up, till the men catch up and accept and start to realize that they tap into the frequency of that word.
Yeah.
And that word comes alive to them, and they start to realize, I don't want to dumb it down. And if there is a better word, yeah, I'll go with it. Because for a while I was trying to come up with a different word that's catchy, that we would slip past their psyche and get it past the programming. But it's like, no, there's power in that word. It's very powerful. And
very.
Yeah. And maybe there's a better word will come along at some stage, but yeah. So it's, yeah.
I feel that the word has been a bit loaded, because if you look at the origins of the word, and I have a Greek background, so in the Greek, it's psyche, psychic, psyche, and psyche means soul. And what we're saying is where our source of intuition, our source of knowing comes, it comes from the soul. So for me, it's very logical. It makes sense that that's the word that gets used. Unfortunately, in more recent times, and certainly probably earlier times too, it's that parody, isn't it, of the psychic with the turban and the crystal ball in front of them, and give me your money and I will tell your future, the fortune teller. And the fortune teller, which is an aspect, it's a lower frequency aspect of the full spectrum of psychic, it certainly sits there, but psychics are not any more dishonest than anyone else in the average society. We have dishonest engineers, we have dishonest lawyers, we have dishonest doctors, but it always seems to be loaded that way. But if we open up the full spectrum of that and understand that we are soul, and soul that is animated in a physical vehicle, if you like, a physical body, then it's actually quite empowering, I feel, to understand and say that we're psychic. And I feel that everyone is psychic. It has to be. We all have a soul. So there is that part of us that links to soul that has that higher knowing. And we don't understand it in the context of traditional science at the moment, although I do know that there is a lot of science now that is starting to look at consciousness. What is it? Where does it go? Is it part of us? Is it in the brain? Where is it? And I feel as science is only as good as the instruments that you have to measure it. If we don't have the right instruments yet, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I'm hoping that with time, people will give this field a little bit more of an investigative and scientific basis so that we can start to see that the science will catch up with what we've been observing for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Well, it's, for the skeptics, they all, I would put $100 on it. They all have a cell phone in their pocket and it operates invisibly.
Yes.
Because from some sort of, because you and I travel back 300 years in time, or maybe 500 years back when they were burning witches. And we both took our cell phones and the signal with it, and we showed people, we showed the heads of the local church, look, you can talk to your bishop over the other side over there, like with one of these, this will be great. Within half an hour, we'd be tied to the stake being burnt because we had this magic voodoo device that could, what they do and how strange it would be to someone a couple of 100 years ago. And so the people who are skeptics today carry that device in their pocket. They have all of the written information that modern history is aware of in that, accessible on that device in their pocket. Like, what sort of voodoo device is that? And like, I mean, there's a measuring, there's a measurement there. What can't you do with it? And now you've got AI, you can tap into ChatGTP for, I don't know, have you played with ChatGTP with the imaging things?
Not the imaging yet, but I've started investigating the imagery, because for me, I thought, how wonderful. I've had ideas for some wonderful oracle cards or intuition cards, and I haven't quite found the right artist for it. And I've been looking for a few years now, and I thought, wow, I know in my mind what the concepts of the imagery is and I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if I could use that as a tool? So I started to look at it, definitely.
Yeah. Well, to do that, like to talk into that thing, and like I showed a friend who had never even heard of it recently, and I said, just make something up. Just tell me a picture. And she said, two kangaroos, standing near a tree. And I went, all right. So I typed that in and I said, how about we make it two boxing kangaroos? And she looked at me like, okay, like whatever. And then I hit bang. 40 seconds later, we had it wasn't like a real life, but it was like a hand-drawn, painted, perfect. Two large kangaroos with boxing gloves on, standing there next to a tree. And there was nothing, no imperfection in it. And 40 seconds, full color. And it was just like, oh my God, like that. To me, that is a measuring device. That's measuring where the technology is, where of the unseen realm, because we can't see how that came together. There's, what do they say, zeros and ones on the computer electronically? You'd understand all that a lot better than me. Producing that.
That's right.
The frequencies, when you and I say the word intuition, there's a frequency in our voice that puts out there. It's different in a different way. It creates a different thing, but it's happening. It's a real thing. So your practice and stuff like that, do you still deal with clients one-on-one doing mediumship?
I do. At the moment, my practice is probably 50-50. So half of my day-to-day is still dealing with one-on-one, and the other half of my business is working with volumes of people. So the training side of tapping into your intuition, understanding your soul, and understanding you as a spiritualized being, as a being, my frequency, is what I teach on the other. So, and I love, for me, the teaching side is absolutely my passion. The other side, the day-to-day for me, of course, I am of service day to day, and people come to me for all sorts of things, from mediumship, which is dealing with the loss of loved ones, to I've had quite a few businessmen actually working with me on their business proposals, and where they feel that they want to expand businesses and things like that. And I do love that side of the business, but it also is a training ground for me because I'm able to see what sort of, what sort of questions are being asked, where it's getting the pulse of society for me as a whole, having the day-to-day. And I've seen lots of change in my practice over 20 plus years. As people have changed, they are looking for deeper. They are looking for soul purpose. They're looking for meaningful lives. They're looking to make business decisions that are more of service. So it's not just making the money, which of course we are in a monetary society. We need the money in some ways, but it's also about how can I make money but still feel fulfilled? And I've really seen that. I'm really pleased to say I've seen that really change. And I do believe as more and more of this AI comes into place and a lot of our day-to-day tasks that are more menial driven are gone, that people will look for more. They will look for more value that they can add to society. So it's interesting to see, and it gives me it taps into that pulse, as I said, and it just gives me some mirroring, some insight into where society is going.
Interesting. And just, it was what you just said there just sparked off something. I recently interviewed a gentleman who's in the US, very successful businessman. He's got his own plane and, not a Learjet, but he's got his own small plane. He's done really well. And he, in the last couple of years, has sorted his life out through the use of psychedelics. And now he's become a psychedelic facilitator. And he's now started a whole new business. And he's got, advisors and staff like da-da-da-da. And every 3 months, they now do a psychedelic journey together with the complete intention of checking on their business plan.
Love that. See?
How is our business plan? What have we got? So and our intention, we're going to look at, is our ego getting in the way? Is this how are our emotions in check with what we want to? So he's trying to balance everything out, like all the important things of life, because he says they feed the business, and then the business needs to be working right so that it can financially feed the rest of everything else. So I thought, yeah, like the world's changing. And then to hear you say, because I'm saying, how the heck do you get men to come to you with their written business plan?
Yeah.
And this guy, he's got an agreement with his advisors and his staff that every quarter we're going to do a psychedelic journey. And where they're doing it in the US, it's still illegal.
Yes.
So he said, we do it at a facility that's 5-star that doesn't exist. You cannot find it. There is no website. It doesn't exist. We have contacts, and we it's a high level 5-star sort of place, and away we go, and we do these sort of things. And I just said to him, like, can you imagine 20 years ago, like me trying to talk to you about this subject? We wouldn't have even found each other without technology. So you sort of saying, some people would hear you say just before with AI, and they'd be going like, oh, she's nuts. Like AI is going to take over and drive us all mad, and it'll be control us and everything. Maybe, I don't know, but there's so much potential for it, for the menial tasks and all that sort of stuff. And we create our own reality, as you said before. Like it depends whether we allow it to take over, or whether we realize the power of our soul, the power of who we are, the frequency, and everything like that. It's an amazing time that we're heading into.
Like any new piece of technology, there's always fear, and there always will be an opportunity for misuse. So I was in the car industry. Years ago, they would have said, oh, cars are going to take over the horse and cart, and all the stable hands are going to lose jobs, and all the haymakers and the strappers and all the leather and the seats and the buggies, etc. We pivot and we innovate, and we move on with the new technology. Can it be misconstrued? Absolutely. If there's someone who is not qualified to drive that vehicle, they are most likely to cause damage to themselves or to other people. Absolutely. And it can be weaponized. A car can be weaponized, of course. So there is that aspect. Is the majority of the people going to do that, or are the majority of the people going to use that technology in that way? Absolutely not. But there is always the outliers, isn't it? Science shows us there's outliers all the time, and the majority of us will do the right thing. And if we can use the AI as a tool for us rather than us being the tool for AI, and how we use that technology is very important. And I believe now more than ever, if we don't have that understanding of us being that soul, and that the source of power, as you say, is from soul, then we're going to lose our power. We're going to give it up, and we're going to move it over into artificial technology that may or may not take us down the right path. We still have to use discernment. We still have to discriminate with what's coming out our way. And we still have to use our feelings and emotions, and AI will never replicate that part of us that makes us human, which is that feeling, that emotion, because there is no logic to that. 2, 3, 4, 5 people will make very different choices faced with the same scenario based on their own personal response, like feeling response to that. And I think we can't lose sight of that either.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, you talked about the other half of your day, your training. So you're training in person or online?
A bit of both. So I train anywhere in online in the world online, of course. And if I'm invited to, I will definitely travel anywhere around the world to offer in-person workshops and seminars as well. So I've ran some overseas, and I've done them here in Australia. In my local community, I run them fairly regularly. And I do feel that some people like that immersive experience. They like to there's certainly a lot to be learnt in terms of fast tracking your development and opening when you are in an environment where there is a group of like-minded individuals, and the energy about that is working. So recently I just did a 2-day intuitive or mediumship course just a couple of weeks ago, and we had about 30 participants that just are still buzzing. I had a follow-up with one of the people yesterday, and she's now moved on to mentoring more deeply. She really wants to take this healing over into the area of horses, actually, which I find really intriguing. And it's quite beautiful to know that these beautiful sentient beings, these horses, are going to be facilitating that healing. And it's just great to see the confidence that, you can give them that push. But I also have a wonderful online community, a container, if you like, where I call it Ignition. And in the Ignition member community, I have 3 levels where people can access, from the absolute beginner to the one that's already exploring to the one that actually wants to run a full professional practice. And one of the things that I have is that really strong business background. So even in my last role that I left when I left corporate was a general manager of a whole Australian sales division. So for me, understanding that business world is very is part of the fabric of my being. I came from a family that was migrants to Australia, Greek immigrants, and like a lot of them in that era, in the 70s and the 80s, they bought shops and supermarkets and mixed businesses. So I was the kid that sat on the milk crate and used the push button till and learned how to count out money, to give change back when, my dad had bought a supermarket. I think I was in grade 4 or 5 at the time. So I was at the till at times. And for me, it was exciting to do that. It was like, having my very real shop. A lot of children have pretend shops that they play with. I had that very real shop. But it just, that was the spirit of my father. He really wanted to make that better life for us all. And so for him, it was hard work. And he's actually the logic guy. So a lot of his lineage, a lot of them are engineers, a lot of them are detectives, like police commissioners. They're still using their intuition, but in a different way, but they're very logic driven. And in parallel, my mother's side are musicians, and the mediumship ability and the psychic ability comes from her line. They're creatives, they're storytellers, they have a very different vibe. So I kind of have the best of both worlds in that regard. And that's what I bring to the table, because I can bring that practical business advice on, and a lot of beautiful sensitives and creatives and intuitives actually are really great at that, but they don't know how to set up their businesses, market who they are, get their messaging across, understand that who they are as a brand and being consistent as a brand, understanding the energy dynamics of your team. Who are you working with? Who is your ideal client? And I don't mean that from the marketing avatar point of view. I mean that from the energetics of who do you want to work with? Is there a frequency resonance with it? Does it align with your own soul? And a lot of that can be found. There is a little bit of science in the numerology. So I do look at dates, the birth dates of businesses, the birth dates of new product development or launch dates, things like that. They can be quite key because you then understand the dynamics of what the birth date of that particular business is or that proposal is. And the other thing, of course, is to look at one of the things, because I am a very clairvoyant medium, so aura for me is I can see color, I can see the aura, and the aura is a blueprint of what your soul's come to do. You can actually read purpose in the aura, and there is a set of colors that come through the aura, and where they sit and how they sit and vibrancy tells me a lot. And so I'm able to look at that and be able to talk about, what are your strengths as a business person? What is the blueprint in your soul, and how do you best use that in order to get to where you need to go?
Yeah,
And
how do you tap into that frequency of that so that you're so that like I just thought of this now, like an analogy. 7 years ago, I tried hard to learn to play the piano. I had time and money on my hands, and I found a very understanding piano teacher just down the street. So once a week for 30 minutes. And I said, "Oh, can come more than that?" She goes, no, it's fine. Just come once a week and go home and practice. At the end of the year, I couldn't do much, but she would set me off with my homework, and just occasionally on my keyboard with my headphones on, I had electric 88 keyboard, and I would plug it so no one had to hear me practice. I would be practicing away, and just occasionally I would hit the notes, and I would hit the notes that sounded ecstatic to my ears.
Yes.
Anyway, and I thought I had it all down pat, and it would just be like I'd be euphoric. And then I'd go back the next week, and she'd say, "Okay, let's show me your homework, what you did," and I'd play it away so proudly. Now I'm sitting on her normal piano, and I'm actually hearing it with my normal ears without the headphones on. So it sounded different. Still sounded great to me. And then she's like, "Oh, that's wonderful. You've done so well." She goes, "All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to, like, when you get to this bit, we're going to do that, that, and that." So without her saying, "You stuffed up, Doug, like you did it wrong." I'm like, like it was just, I could only ever get about 3 seconds together that really sounded good. But when it did, and so it's like you're saying there with the soul, like to help people, like you can see which keys they need to hit on the piano in what order to light them up, to like where should they be heading. So you talk there also about seeing auras, which fascinates me because I interviewed a gentleman in the US who, as a teenager, had a near-death experience, and after that experience, he had he still sees auras now, and he's in his 50s. Plus a lot of other things, still go on, which I don't think as you get to talk to him, you realize, in the beginning, you think, "Oh, that'd be so cool." And then after a while, you think, "Yeah, I don't know if that would be so cool all the time." Do you see auras all the time, or do you have to concentrate and get into a frame, or how is it for you?
Yeah, so I have to do it with intention, and I've trained myself to do it that way. I don't want to be going around looking at people's auras all day, every day, particularly without permission. So there is an ethical aspect to this. And it's none of my business unless I'm being consulted. I really, it is none of my business. I really shouldn't be going there looking at everyone's aura. And because that would be more about my ego rather than being of service. And I think that's really important, because just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I do believe we do need to be in charge of our abilities. And for that, there's many processes. You know, if I can just circle back to the other guests that you had with the psychedelics, and that is a path. It's not a path I subscribe to. I'll be clear here, because I believe you can access all that without the use of interventions such as psychedelics. For me, it's actually making the time. There is a process called sitting in the power as a spiritualist medium. That's a process that I do, which is an active meditation. So it's not passive. It's like sitting in with your board of directors, if you like, and setting an agenda and having a discussion with your team. I call it your spirit team, and getting to know. So we sit in the power for two reasons. We sit in the power to get to know our soul better, and which means we understand who we are, what our talents are, what our abilities are. And that is one of the cornerstones of my practice and my teachings is the sitting in the power and getting to understand your soul's awareness, and then getting to meet and understand your spirit team. We all have a team that is around us, and we don't always have to know what their names are or whether they're American Indians or, you know, Mother Teresa or Einstein or whoever it is. We don't always need to know that. What we do need to know is how they interact with us. What do they feel like? And we also need to know, what are they helping us with? And it's usually in alignment with our purpose. And if we can do that consciously and actively, and we make it part of our daily start of the day. So for me, when I start the day, I always go into that power. So it's like going to the gym as well. We build the energy, we expand the auric field. I invite my team in, and then I talk to them and I say, I want to be of service. Everything that comes out of my mouth today, may that be the exact thing that the clients I interact with or the students I interact with need to hear. And I do that debrief afterwards as well. And I do it for myself, so my own development, and I do it for my business and my clientele. And I think if you can do that, then you become more and more sure of who you are and your abilities, and you look less outside to, you know, gurus, teachers, validation, stimulation, whatever it is. You look less for that, and you become self-generating when it comes to your own power. And I think that is the key. And we don't do that. We used to before technology, because we had nothing else to do. And we would call that contemplating. We would finish our dinners, we might sit, and we could be having some music in the background on the wireless, and we would have just sat and thought about the day, thought about where we're going. And we don't make time to do that anymore. And that is the greatest shame, I believe.
Yeah. Interesting there, you're using the word wireless. I haven't heard that in a long time. And I'm just wondering, like, because, you know, there's a lot of people from America, probably
Yes.
the majority of people listen in, whether they actually ever use that word.
Mm.
So if any of them didn't, it was the radio. When
It was the radio, yeah.
Before we had TV, after dinner, we'd turn the radio on, or my mum would turn it on first thing in the morning. You know, when I'd wake up, the radio, the wireless.
The wireless.
I don't know. I don't know if that's an Aussie term or
probably an English term.
English, yes.
I tend to have English guides, so I have very old school English guides on my team. So a lot of my words are from another era at times, because that's who I'm working with in my spirit team. But also, wireless is technically the correct term for the radio in terms of an engineering perspective.
Right.
Wireless communication. So
yes. Yeah. Interesting. Very good. So you talked about you've got your courses online and things like that as well, and you've got a book as well. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so my book is called Giving Spirit a Voice, The Mechanics of Mediumship. So it is literally a practical manual on how to tap into your intuition and develop your mediumship ability. So mediumship meaning connecting to, I need to clarify mediumship a little bit perhaps for the listeners as well. So mediumship has three pillars to it. One is to connect to our past loved ones, our deceased loved ones. to verify their identity and then to bring on any messages and information that they'd like to share. That is one aspect of mediumship. But the other aspect of mediumship is, or speaking mediumship, philosophical mediumship, is about connecting to the higher guides that will bring words of wisdom, inspiration to you and the collective as a whole. So it's not specific to an individual. It can relate to everyone in society. And then the third pillar of mediumship is healing. So the healing aspect of it. And I think if you can understand the mechanics, the foundational components of how to open, how to prepare yourself, how to sit in the power, how to connect to your guides, what are the barriers, what are the things that enhance that connection. All that's contained in my book. And there is a chapter also on self-care, because you brought the piano analogy in, and the piano wires need to be finely tuned, and our central nervous system is that wire. And if we're a bit overstrung, we're not going to be able to get that information, and it probably will affect us physically and our health. If we're not quite in tune, then our information that we do get will be very inaccurate. So it is that fine line. And so understanding the self-care of that, and also talking about, I have a chapter in there too, because there's a lot of parents that have children that are young mediums. So I didn't have the guidance growing up because my family weren't really aware of it. They didn't understand the ability as I was growing up. And so we have more awareness now. So if we do have a child, what do we do with them if they've got ability? How do we help them? And there's a chapter there as well. So and every chapter has a set of exercises at the end of it so that you can actually put the theory into practice. So that's my book, and it has a little bit of an introduction about me at the beginning, but it's not really about me totally. It's just to set the scene and to show my pathway, and every pathway is different. But people have really responded well to this book. And I've also developed a companion book to that, which is Giving Spirit a Voice Mediumship Journal. And the journal itself is for you to record your sittings, your readings, to record your development. But the bulk of it at the front is all about your soul. And I've written a little exercise on how to connect to your soul, and so that you are using those pages to get to know your soul as well. So those two come together. Or you don't have to buy them together, but they are a companion. It's a companion journal for that book as well.
Interesting. So everything you said there made sense to me, but one little bit, just that you said there in the 3 parts, you talked about mediumship healing.
Yes.
That I would like some more explanation on, how and where that works.
Absolutely. So in America, they call that channeled healing or spiritual healing. In the UK, it's called trance healing. And what that actually means is that you are the healer, the healing medium is going into either, so I'm just going to cough. Pardon me. It's either they're going into a very light or a deeper trance, linking and joining to the spirit healers, whether they are doctors, shamans, Reiki masters, the full gambit of whatever exists here exists there. And it depends on who your team works with it. So I'm a healing medium as well.
So you're doing this for a client one-on-one?
For a client, yes.
And they might be on Zoom, or they might be with you.
Yeah.
And they've got a physical ailment.
Correct. Or a mental or emotional or, spiritual ailment. And they've come and they've said, I would like a healing for this. And I link with that, transmit the healing. So there's either contact or contactless. So it's either hands-on if they're in front of you, distant so that your hands are off even though they're in front of you, or absent healing, which means I could be in Australia and sending it over to the US and the person would still receive it. And what I need to just clarify too is that healing doesn't mean curing, although often it can do. And the healing is given without us the medium without us manipulating it or directing it in any way, shape, or form. We rely on the divine intelligence of spirit, and that they will give that healing wherever it needs to go. So it's quite an amazing practice. I have seen with my own eyes miraculous healings, and I've seen beautiful healings where there's a sense of peace that's come. I had a lovely man who was terminal with cancer, and he had only a few weeks to live. And he was a tough, salt of the earth plumber, just beautiful man, but not really open to all the spiritual. And his lovely wife asked if I would give him some healing, and he came, to his credit. And as I worked on him, he wasn't giving us the full story initially. He was saying that he had a lot longer. But when I felt into that, I could see in my mind's eye that cancer was all through his body. And I said to him, "You've not got long." And he said, "No, I didn't want to upset my family." And I said, "That's okay." And then his brother from the spirit world came, his brother that was already deceased. And so I gave him the contact and the connection. And I'll never forget this lovely man, because when he got up and he looked at me with amazement, and he said, "Do you mean I get to see my brother when I die?" And I said, "Yes, your brother will be waiting for you," because that's what the brother had told me. I will be there for him. I will take him through. And that was just, I can't describe the relief on this man's face.
The fear gone.
Gone. And he was joyous, and he left joyous. Now, I have had the honor and the pleasure of connecting to him over the last 5 or 6 years from the other side. And I feel like I'm connecting to an old friend now, because his family, all his family members come every so often, and they, probably annually, but because there's a number of them, I get to connect with him a few times. And what he's come back to say is, he talks about the day-to-day and things that have changed in their family since he's been gone. So there's a lot of verifiable evidence that comes through that has given him tremendous comfort. But for him, I will never forget that face, because the fear just dissolved instantly. It was amazing.
Yeah, and the fear of death. People are so, and that's one thing I love that my journey in recent years has brought me, is that fear of death is just gone. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I don't like pain. Okay,
Yes.
I don't want a long, painful death. Okay, like, I'm not into that. My sweet mama, who's 92, in a nursing home, every time you see her, she'll say it at least once, probably more times than that, because her memory's challenged. I just want to lay down and go home to Jesus. Like, that's all. I just want to go to sleep. And why hasn't that happened yet? I can't believe it. I was raised in an orphanage. She was. And, it's like, raised in a Catholic orphanage. My 4 siblings have all passed away. Why am I the last one left? Us 5 little girls were all in an orphanage. And why am I still here? What am I doing? And I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. Yeah.
And there would be a function of biology with that, how strong constitutionally she is and the body she's chosen to be in. And there might be something else that she's, certainly if it's not her learning, she might be there touching lives in a way that she would never know. And there was a wonderful book called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven that I quite love, because that kind of explains that side of things quite beautifully. And, if she might find that, even though she felt that she's waiting and she just wants to go home, that when she does go home, she might turn around and say, "Oh, wow, I did actually touch that carer, the other person in the sitting room that sat with me, for the last 5 years of my life," or whatever it happens to be, in ways that she wouldn't necessarily know.
Yeah. Oh, because when we walk down the hall, like, I'm basically 6 foot. She's now 4'6".
Oh, bless her.
God, yeah. We're walking down the hall. She's on a little walker, and we'll go past the door, and she's 100% deaf in one ear. And so she speaks a little loud at times, and she's got Italian heritage. So, she can speak up, and she'll go past the door, and she goes, "That poor man in there, he's only like 68 and he can't get out of bed." She goes, "I go in and he always wants to hold my hand and he never wants me to leave, and I say hi to him a bit, and then we go past this door, and that person there, and she
Yeah,
knows them all,
touch light.
and she does. She goes in and she's not backward and coming forward.
Mm.
My sister was visiting her one day. My sister actually like put a message to the siblings, like she was a bit upset that the nurse came in one day and said, "Oh, Rita, so and so across the hall would like you to come across and see her because she's quite upset." And my sister's like, "I'm visiting mum right now. Like, well, what do you mean? Like, and the nurse goes, "Well, your mum's really good at settling her down. And she's asking for her." Yeah,
So think about that, a little
yeah,
healing, a healer right there. That
yeah,
little bit of healing that she's offering
yeah.
is making huge differences.
Yeah, and she was raised in a Catholic orphanage all her life, and then when she got out, she started going to a Baptist church, and she's just always been about spiritual things. When I was a teenager, she put me on to conspiracy theories. She took me to
Oh,
there was a guy, something, what's his name? Someone von something or other. She took me to this thing. I thought it was going to be a church thing. And he puts his presentation up and it's all about sunspots. This is when I'm like 12. It's about
wow.
this slide presentation. And every time there's high sunspot activity on the planet, there's wars and there's high inflation and there's all these natural disasters. And it was like, and then he's talking about all this conspiracy stuff. And his book, was it a book called
It's
Chariots of the
chariots of the gods. Yeah,
Gods? Yeah,
I
that guy
know
was
the
live
author.
in person in
Yeah.
Surfers Paradise on the Gold Coast in this ballroom of the Chevron Hotel. And I'm
Wow.
thinking, thought mum dragged me along to some church meeting like we used to, she'd always take me to. And she's taken
Yeah.
me there. And then, yeah, I was like, wow, she was always this very full-on Christian woman, but very advanced. And then we had the first weird, out there, wonderful, full-on tongue-talking church on the Gold Coast. Who's one of the first people to join that one? My mum. And I'm
What
like,
an incredible pioneer. I love
yeah,
that she's done that because truly
yeah,
she's, for the age that she's at now, so you think about it's only 100 years ago
mm,
that she was born, and she's well advanced in her time. And I think, and that book was, and it probably still is an amazing book, and it's got a lot of food for thought there, whether you believe in conspiracy theories or not. And I look at it with interest. I don't go one way or the other with it but I look at it as possibility. And for me, if it's possible, I'm like, yeah, it sounds plausible. There's some, for other things like the flat earthers, for example, that for me is like, we've been out into space. We can see the earth is not flat. Now, whether they want to call it something else, well, that's okay. That's a belief system. Is it flat? Does it appear flat in another dimension? Probably. And maybe that's what they're tapping into. So I don't know. But in this dimension that we are in, we know it's a sphere. And so for me, science is from the point of view of the observer, and we know that I think it was Einstein that said that. I could be wrong on that one, but whichever way it is, it's true. So my science might be right for the world and the lens that I'm looking through it, but someone else's science might be right through whatever lens they're looking at it. And that's the beauty about the world we live in. There are so many different possibilities and different realities that who are we to say what's right and what isn't? But so I do like that there is robust debate around different theories. What I don't like is when theories are shut down completely and you don't get an opportunity to have a debate, because for me, true science is investigating. It's not stating the outcome and then trying to set up the experiment to prove the outcome. That is not science, in my opinion. And a lot of people mistakenly refer to that as science. And true science is, I wonder what would happen if, and just stay open to see what conclusions you could draw when you run that experiment.
yeah, yeah. So back to your history with working with men.
Yes.
Um, what advice can you give us from one being a female
Mm,
and two being as in touch with the unseen realm as you are?
mm,
I guess firstly, what are the benefits to men? So if there's a man listening who's on the
yeah,
fence, you know, like this
yeah.
is getting a bit out there. What advantages them to keep listening and to
Yeah.
potentially tap into this in their life in a practical, how's it going to make their life better?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I believe the masculine brain, whether it's in the biology of a male or a female, but the masculine brain is one that is very details oriented. I'm not saying females can't be detailed oriented, but generally men's brains are that they will go through the detail. And there is, because there is that logical aspect, where you go down through the layers, and you can train that brain regardless of gender to sit that way. So I do feel that is the advantage, and that the level of detail that they could retrieve intuitively is quite large. And if they can tap into that and get past the barrier, because that brain can also be the barrier. It's the blessing and the curse. It's the double-sided sword. And if they, I always say to the men, if you can accept, just say, I'm going to assume that this intuitive stuff works until I'm proven it's not. And usually they will find that consistently that that intuition comes in 100%. And if they can do that, because often the default position is you need to prove it's right. And I want to challenge that. I want to say, assume it's right until it's not. And then, see how you go that way, because you're approaching it from a different energy, a different frequency, a different vibration. Where does the intuitive side go? It starts to give them, so the benefits of a male, or anyone indeed, but certainly the men, is that they will start to get in touch with their hidden abilities. Instead of being mind driven, they become whole being driven. So I feel that their life would become a lot more fulfilling, because a lot of men, yes, they do earn and they go off and they think their duty is to, make money for the families and all that kind of thing. But often it's at the expense of who they are as a person, and for them to have that full fulfillment. So I believe that if they were to use intuition, they would become very much alive rather than existing. And they would become multidimensional rather than 2 or 3-dimensional. And so that is the advantage for them. And ultimately, why do we do that? It's to increase the level of joy in our life. And so for them, they can give themselves permission to become more joyous, to live more joyous lifetimes, more impactful lifetimes than the doing side of things.
Yeah, well, some good reasons why to do it. More joyous, more just, and that sort of thing, and becoming alive. Because, there's a lot of men that live lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about my mum, and my dad was one of those. When I heard that 35 years ago, I thought of my dad and someone else I knew at the time. And I thought, that is what they're living, a
Yeah.
life of quiet desperation instead of being alive. Yeah. So that's some reasons why
And
to do it.
present, really present in your life, really, rather than just living it through the brain of the task driven, where we become that expanded self. And I feel there's so much benefit to health and well-being, to longevity, and to quality of life there as well.
Yeah, awesome. So that's why men should do it. And if, I think a lot of men would go, okay, I can, that sounds better than what I'm living right now. What are their steps? If they're already listening to this podcast, they're probably not at step one.
No, they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
If they wanted to understand their ability further, then something that I offer, and I'm sure others do around the world, but certainly what I offer is what's called a spiritual assessment, where I do look at their auric field, their colors in their aura, and I look at their date of birth, and I also use my own connection to my own guides. to give them a roadmap of where their abilities are currently, what is still to progress or still to come up should they develop it, and where their abilities could take them, what path that could happen. And I do that through a spiritual assessment. So that's one of my offerings. The other offering I do is what's called a life map reading, where we take the 3 top key areas of life that they would like to look at. And I always have an other box down the bottom where everything else goes in there. And that is channeled from me. So I don't actually speak to them for the first 20 minutes other than, asking what those 3 areas of life are that they'd like the reading to focus on. And then I will channel information for them. And then from there, so this is this is not a, like a psychic reading as such, because it goes deeper into the soul level. And it then gives them a roadmap of what to focus on in the next 12 to 18 months. And they are really beautiful and really a great way to have a visual. And often people will have them at the front of their diary, that life map, or they might have it on, some people have vision boards, they might put it on their vision board, and it gives them something to aim for and allows them to get confirmation when they're feeling a bit wobbly as they're going forward. And for those, often between either of those 2 areas, if the abilities are there and it's important for them to develop those abilities, I will also outline what that looks like and how that might be developed. And they don't always have to do that with me. They might find a local person, but I would put that down and say, you would need to do A, B, and C. And if you can find it, often people, because they do like the connection that we have, they like me to continue on with that, and that's perfectly okay. But it's not something that I say, you must do it with me. There is many beautiful, talented people out there that might be in alignment, and they take the roadmap and they say, right, this is what came up for me and this is what I need to be doing. The 2 things that I say, the steps that they are, is to be curious and to allow yourself to be vulnerable. Because by allowing yourself to be vulnerable, you're then opening your energy field up. And we know in an energetic wave, there is sub-frequencies in there. It's packets of information. And if you can open that envelope, then it allows spirit to bring in those higher frequency packets of information in that envelope. But to do that, you need to be open and to say, I'm curious, I'm going to give it a go. I've got nothing to lose. And I think if they can do that, it doesn't mean they have to sit. A lot of men will say, oh, I don't want to sit on cushions and in the lotus position and meditate and, and hold on to crystals. And it's not about
Me,
that.
I don't want. Yeah, I got my hand up. My legs don't work well in that position at all. I can tell you.
And trust me, I don't do that either. And I can tell you that hand on heart. I go for a walk with spirit. I take my dog and I just have my board meeting with my team as I'm walking in nature. And that's what I do. But you could be sitting on another area that I used to connect with spirit was at the gym. So as I'm focusing on my breath and doing my weight training, you shift your awareness. So I would zone out on who's around me, and that's where I'd get my inspiration. But it can be in the shower. It can be doing mundane tasks like mowing the lawn or whatever it is. And so that's what I want to work with, because I want to say to people, there is no one size fits all, and you certainly don't have to go through some of these, weird and wonderful practices. If that's your bag, then go ahead and do it. That's no issue. I don't, say to you, don't do that if that's what you enjoy, but it's not the only pathway and the only access point to this.
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious what you would think of this, or what you would say to this. So if someone's listening and they're thinking, yeah, like this is, they're not probably going to use the word resonate, but they're thinking, I like what I hear.
Mm.
But I've done things before that I thought I liked, and I spent all this money, and then I've never done anything with it, and nothing ever happened with it. But I have done other things where I've spent money and done things, and I was really happy with that. Like like I wouldn't be where I was now because of this or that or the other. So it's, how do they know what the message is telling them? Because sometimes, and they could say, well, I've got, when I look at the app on my phone with my bank account, it tells me I can't afford that.
Mm.
Or if that's not the issue, I don't have the time. I
Mm.
just don't, because my job's currently 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. And on the sixth day, it's 5 hours. And 2 months ago, I started, gym training, and I'm committed to that 4 nights a week. And, and we've got a new baby, and,
Yeah.
I have to
And
tag team with my wife. I have to, because when I get home, she's just, the baby's on the hip, and she hands them to me out the door because she hasn't had a shower since, and it's 6 p.m. And some people have genuine time constraints. I have a lot less now because my children have all grown and gone. But I remember those days. One, I guess, how do they recognize that? Like, this sounds like what I want, but is it going to be one of those things again that I go out and do that, spend the money and the time, and then I never do anything with it? Or is it a life-changing point? Is it at the other extreme? Is it one extreme where I'm just going to blow all this cash on that? Well, my spouse is going to think I'm a loser again because I've done this 4 times before. Or is it this life-changing event again where I just jump up 10 notches in 6 months because I hit the right point? Like I hit that sweet point. That I'm just trying to think. There was something where you talked before about your whole being driven, like where it's, you hit that point. Any thoughts there on how someone judges that as they're hearing this now?
Yeah, so usually the way it's worked that I found personally and also in my practice is when you're meant to do something, your soul will rise up, and that calling, that impulse will be undeniable. You just will not be able to say no to it. Even if your logical brain will say, I don't have this, and this, it will be like a feeling that rises up. And that's happened to me a couple of times. So I'll share some examples. So many years ago, I sole parent, I've got I had a younger child, and I was very self-developed for this mediumship side of things. But then I wanted to understand it in a deeper sort of, like, just to learn the mechanics from it, from a professional, from someone that I would be able to look at and say, yep, I trust what they're saying. They've lived and breathed it, that they come with some expertise, and I need to check in on what my self-development was like. And for me, that person was, she's now gone to the spirit world, but it was a wonderful lady called Mavis Patilla, who was and is a spiritualist, teaching medium, and she used to travel around the world with 50 years experience. And at the time, I needed to fund a trip to see her, to spend 5 days with her, to have this immersion. And I, as I said, sole parent, my immediate family lived in another state, so I didn't really have the means necessarily, but I got the push.
So you need the babysitter, you need the finances, and you need time.
And time. And remember, being self-employed, when I'm not working for 5 days, I'm also losing income, right? And I ended up going to the UK. She worked in she was running a course at the Arthur Finlay College, and I, at the time, was thinking, how am I going to juggle all these finances? I managed to get an agreement that my parents would come over from another state to look after my daughter for the time I was away. Then I, on a heart in my mouth, I booked the course, but I didn't know how I was going to get the airfare. I didn't have the airfare at the time. So I paid a significant amount for the course, and I thought, I don't know. But every time, every core of my fiber of my being said, you will be okay, you will be supported. And and I can't describe that knowing. And then this is true story. I kept looking at the airfares, and at the time, I think they were about nearly 3,000 or 2,800, something like that. And, which was quite expensive. It's expensive today, but it was expensive for them. And I was like, oh, and I kept looking and thinking, how am I going to do it? Where am I going to get this money from? And then one day I got woken up at 5 a.m. and I heard Spirit say, book your airfares now. And I got up and I booked, and I found airfares for $950 to the UK return. I booked them. And then I had to ring the agent for some aspect of their fare a few hours later. I needed to clarify something. And the agent said to me, oh, wow, we've never had them so cheap. And they sold out in 40 minutes. We only had a 2-hour window, and all these airfares sold in 40 minutes. He goes, you're so lucky to have received that airfare. So part of it was like, oh my God, I'm so lucky. And the other part was, yeah, they had it worked out. They knew. Now it gets better because, of course, the course was a residential course. So I knew I was covered food and accommodation for the 5 days, but you don't just go to the UK for 5 days. I wanted to stay on a bit longer and get myself settled, do the course so I'm not jet lagged, and then take off after that. While I was getting myself organised, one of my friends who moved to the UK, I told her I'd be over, and I said, I'd love to see you in London. And she said, oh, do you know what? She said, I can see you on this day, but the very next day we're heading off to Germany to I think it was the Christmas markets. She said, you wouldn't be able to house sit our house, would you, for free and look after our dog for 5 days? I was like, yep. So I now got accommodation in London for free. I got to live in, with this dog at the London life and not the tour, the hotel life, and then moved to the car, and it all fell into place. So that for me demonstrates that if it's in your soul's, purpose and path to do it, Spirit will make time. The flip side of that is sometimes it's not your time, and that's okay. Be okay with that. Sometimes it is more important for you to raise those little babies and to be, the best dad that you can be. And that is okay, because spiritual progression there isn't just a small window of opportunity. It is a lifetime of unfoldment. And so there will be times in life where you can't do. I've held myself back to raise my child for certain things. And then as my child has grown, I'm now able, and I have the freedom to do more traveling and to do more with my work. And that is okay, because I'm not planning on retiring at 64. I plan on going till I can, because I love it. It's not work for me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. All right. We'll wind up, but before we do, is there anything, I'll have your contact details in the show notes, all that sort of stuff will be covered. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to mention before we wind up?
Well, just one last little thing, and that is that I have developed an app as well that helps with intuition and sitting in the power meditation. For those that are super busy, that do go to the gym, etc., you can listen to those meditations, and there are exercises there. It's a basic app. It was designed during COVID, where I couldn't ship my cards over to people, and I kind of like it because it has the meditations on it now. It tells you how to set intention and how to clear your energy at the end of the day, which is also very important for no matter what we do. And that is called Spirit Ly, and it's on the Google Store and also on the App Store. So that is something that people that are super busy can at least sit with this in the, whatever moments they have, whether it's 3 a.m. after they put newborns down to sleep and they've got 5 minutes, whatever it happens to be. But that certainly can be another way to do it. And I guess in terms of a philosophical parting, it's just to say that your journey is unique, and it's not to compare yourself, to look at other people and see what they're doing, or to assume just because one person can see and you can't, that you don't have ability, because everyone puts an unnatural emphasis on the clairvoyance, whereas Spirit uses all the senses to communicate, and clairvoyancy, the seeing, is only one aspect of it. So trust your own path, trust your team, they are your greatest teachers, and trust yourself in it as well.
Excellent. Yeah. Trust is a very, very important thing. And particularly with intuition, as we do start to trust it, experience it, we start to get a lot more confidence that it's got our back, it's got our better interest at heart. Yeah, no, I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ioanna. It's been very informative for myself and I'm sure for the listeners. And so anyone listening, have a look in the show notes. The links are there. You can tap in, have a look at a website, the book, the app, the other book, the journaling book, all there. Excellent. And if anyone wants to connect with you online or in person, that's there. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.